Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Takasugi Shinsaku. So, Takasugi is our new AoE 5-star quick limited archer on JP. So, he's yet another in a wave of AoE archers. It's really interesting to me because I've seen a lot of people getting really critical about that aspect here lately, and I just want to do a quick PSA here at the beginning of this and say, guys, look, I know they've been on a string of AoEs. Don't let that cloud your judgment on a unit. Again, don't worry too much about them releasing AoEs. They will release more single targets. I don't know why they're on this kick right now, but trust me when I say this, they'll eventually get off of it. So it's nothing to actually be concerned about. I understand some people want single targets to roll. I myself was kind of hoping that Takasugi was a single target, but again, I wouldn't let that influence how I feel about his overall kit. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what I think here. So looking at his overall attack power here, it's actually really good. He's up in the 12k range. That's not down in the 11 or even 10k range like we've seen with some 5 stars. It's certainly not the like crazy ass 13k range that some do have, but still fairly nice here. His HP is a little bit on the low side for a 5-star here, down sub 13k, but I'll still take it. Again, especially where like offense is really meta in this game a lot of the times. I'm not too concerned about a character not having a lot of HP because there's so many things that you can do about it. Again, he is a man-traded archer here. He does have 8% star gen and 149 star absorption. Again, kind of what we expect. Archers naturally have pretty high star absorption just due to the class, and so he's no exception to that. He does have a 0.57 NP charge rate. This is maybe a concern. It is sort of in that sort of low 50% range that we see a lot of units get shoved into nowadays. And that's because I think the devs play it cautious. They don't want a unit turning into another like Lancelot Berserker or someone like that, where they're just like refunding a ton, or maybe kind of going overkill in some of the cases, like Emiya once you activate his projection, right? But again, certainly I don't think it's bad. I think this is a serviceable amount, but it is a concern, and I'm going to talk about that as we go through here. He does have the 3% charge defense here. He is alignment chaotic good. He's a male gendered unit. Again, he has hominide, humanoid, servant, and weak to intimate Elish traits, so not a whole lot there to be able to exploit. But again, at least just due to the fact that he is male, you'll always have somebody to counter him with, particularly Tamamo and Consort Lancer. Both of them should be great in terms of like just being able to exploit any of his traits if you come up against him. Now, I did see some concerns about this because we were talking about it before I hit the record button as to his deck here. This is an interesting thing. He is 2B, 2Q, 1A. So he does have double buster, double quick. Now, to me, this is kind of your ideal setup right now, post-Summer Scotty era. You basically have 2 different cards that have 2 sets each here that are able to be sort of min-maxed by virtue of taking the various Scotties into the party as a support. So it allows you to take advantage of so many cards in the deck for critting. And so that allows the quick setup to basically maybe have the opportunity to get through a wave without having to NP. They might be able to stagger cards and get something to work because of the way that works, especially if you're facing an odd structured node with a single enemy. So this is kind of, to me, how the devs see quick getting fixed, at least as of right now. We'll see if they have other stuff planned down the line. I'm going to say if this was their plan for fixing quick, they still got work to do. They haven't actually fixed it yet, if that's the case. But this does at least open up more options, so it is nice. I'm not going to say this isn't a good thing for it. So I do like that. His hit counts here are actually stellar. He has all above average hit counts at 4 apiece, with only the extra attack being average. So everything here is really good in that regard, and you guys know hit counts are absolutely great indicators of the ability to NP gen and star gen with cards. So that is also probably one of the factors here for why the NP gain rate was maybe a little bit lower. And again, I think it's going to be something that you guys will see will be to his benefit with how his deck is, how his kit is built complementing this deck. So as we move forward here, we look at his first active skill here. He increases the party's quick and buster performance each 3 turns, but only 20%. So that's a little bit anemic as far as steroids go, but it's not the whole picture on the steroids, and I'll talk more about that as we go through. And again, he does overcharge the party's NP by 1 stage 1 time for 3 turns. This is another really interesting thing because this would allow him to work in an invincible comp. We've already talked about how invincible comps nowadays, by virtue of someone like, say, Proto Merlin, can actually work regardless of who the DPS is now. But this would allow him to kind of be socketed in with like a Merlin and a Castoria and still sort of function in the same way that like Morgan Le Fay does in that comp. The only problem is, at least in Morgan Le Fay's case, she can get the steroid from Merlin. In an Arch Unit's case, they might be able to get the steroid from Castoria. In Takasugi's case, he's quick, so you're not necessarily going to be able to get him an actual effective steroid. But at least, hey, you could use Merlin's Buster buff on him for some extra crit damage and making those Buster cards work out well. So I don't think it's the end of the world if he just doesn't have a like super awesome type of NP steroid for that in the party's supports. So I do think this actually would open up another possibility for how he can be used. But don't worry too much about that. It's not the biggest of deals that he's able to be in this. The one thing I do like, though, is because it's party wide here, this does open up the doors as well for sort of hybrid setups where you've got multiple DPS trying to handle something. So that is really nice in his case, especially for someone like him that does have a nice overcharge effect himself. So I do like this. It is nice that he has this as part of his kit. It's all on a 6-turn cooldown here, so nothing too crazy. His second skill increases one ally's critical damage for 3 turns by up to 50% and reduces their skill cooldown by 1. This is a really interesting application. There's not a whole lot of quick units that can reduce skill cooldowns. In fact, the one that I can think of off the top of my head is basically Made Alter. So this is nice that he has this. I think a lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to think that this is just some sort of like weaker version of Koyanskaya's system. And the reality is these sorts of things existed even before Koyanskaya. So I am happy to see him have it. This does mean in some sort of challenge setup, he is flexible. He can basically move this skill around and use it on a unit in order to get them back to their cooldowns as they might need. And then certainly this can also be just used to target himself and give himself 50% crit damage on top of that. So keep in mind that the crit damage here is a targetable buff. And that's really good. And that I think is going to get him some use in some of these like hybrid comp setups for stuff like lottos, for stuff like 90 plus or 90 plus plus type of nodes. You might see him kind of fit in there as someone that can handle a wave and set someone else up because of this. So it's a really interesting aspect to his kit that he has it. And then his third skill here, it grants himself guts 1 time for 3 turns. So right there, you've got hard survivability in his deck. Definitely something I like. Again, it's only a 3000 HP though, so this is pretty much like the HP value is not bad here, but due to the 1 time 3 turns duration, it's not a very good guts. It's just a average guts is what I would say. He charges his own NP gauge here by up to 30%. Another really nice thing for him, especially since now that we have Appends, unlocking his mana loading, maxing it out would mean that his charge skill in combination with that Append will put him at 50% right there just off the bat. So definitely going to start opening the doors to using him with either 50% CEs or maybe even starting him from 0, which I'll talk about in a second. Then he's going to increase his own attack for 3 turns by 30%. So he's got a nice hard 30% steroid here on top of that first skill, giving him 20% to both Buster and Arts. Or sorry, both Buster and Quick. So definitely nice. That's going to help offset sort of the issue that he was having with the, again, the low steroid on the first part. And then let's look at his passive skills here. So he has Magic Resistance D, Independent Action B, again, giving him a little bit more crit damage here to pop off with. And then, oddly enough, a passive skill dealing with arts. So this increases his own arts performance by 6% and crit damage even further by another 6% there. And some of you may be wondering, well, why arts? But we actually do see this all the time with certain units where the card that they have the least of is the card that receives a little bit of attention via the passives. It's a very common tactic to make that card better, at least in terms of raw performance. by giving it a little bit of an extra nudge with the passive. So that way it's kind of worth using if you have to. Again, talking about his Append skills here, obviously extra attack, finesse, and mana loading are going to be great. Mana loading is going to be absolutely the thing you should go to first with his setup, and I think you'll see why when I start talking refund numbers with you guys. And then his third skill here is anti-ruler attack damage aptitude, which I'm going to be honest, probably not the best of uses for your coins. He doesn't really have any extra synergy against rulers. And again, being one of the main 7 classes, it does mean, one of the main 6 classes, I'll say, we'll leave out Berserker here. It does mean that he's going to do less damage against a ruler. So you really don't want to be taking him. You'd rather take, at minimum a Berserker or someone who's actually effective or even just neutral against the ruler. So again, because he doesn't have any sort of niche to actually be able to exploit this, I wouldn't use this for your coins. Looking at his Noble Phantasm here, again, remember he's AoE quick, so he does have an 8-hit AoE quick NP. That's solid. Again, we definitely see some of the better refunders sitting there at 11 hits and stuff like that. But certainly this is not a bad number of hits, especially considering we've seen quick units that have 3 hits, 5 hits, you name it, right? So 8 hits is definitely solid for refund in that regard. He deals damage to all enemies, so just really straightforward. Again, nothing special about the NP in that regard. But then we get to this absolute whopper of an overcharge effect here. So basically, he gets a all-color type steroid for 1 turn activating first. So every single card here gets a base minimum of an additional 20% of performance. Then on top of that, he increases his own crit damage for 3 turns activating first of up to 30%. So on top of the 50% that he had targetable for 3 turns, he also gets a stackable 3 turn as he begins to loop 30% crit damage on his NP here. So really, really nice. It sets him up for down the line for being able to crit hard and harder and harder, right? So I do like that. We can maybe argue that especially in quick setups, one of the things we don't necessarily need is more crit capability. But imagine maybe you're not in the most ideal of setups. Maybe you're in some sort of weird hybrid setup, or maybe you're in a challenge comp trying to go the distance with him. All of a sudden, this actually begins to really shine through for him. It's just going to make his cards really good as he begins to generate stars and actually be able to, again, soak them to himself naturally by virtue of being an archer. So I do like that. I do think that this is going to make him fairly strong, even though he doesn't necessarily have anything really insane in terms of niches. So again, I've seen a lot of people talking about Takasugi today. A lot of people are kind of saying that they feel like he's underwhelming or that they're not impressed by his refund numbers or something like that. And I'm here to point out that his refund numbers are actually exactly what we would want for a quick unit nowadays. I think a lot of people kind of go a little bit crazy and assume that, oh, it's a quick unit, it's not going to refund good, and they just kind of write that off. Or maybe some people are thinking that, say someone like say Shonagon is going to be really similar to Takasugi. Say Shonagon's actually going to be a lot less in terms of her refund compared to someone like Takasugi. So that's the trade-off of having all those extra niches for damage. She's not going to have nearly as much refund capability. So Takasugi here is basically in a double Scotty setup, going to only get to 41% here. And that's, again, using nothing else against neutral enemies. I think you guys are going to see against something like, say, Berserkers, Takasugi might have some issues. He'll be able to get to overcharge hits a little bit better in that regard, but he's not necessarily going to get a lot of good refund off of Berserker. But at least for neutral enemies, and then obviously better for something like, say, Sabers, where he'll actually be effective. Getting to the overkill, definitely going to be a little bit easier in that case, but at least, the refund should be more there. So again, at 41% against neutral targets, that's not bad. I think the problem that you're going to be looking for is you probably need some sort of extra little oomph, something to kind of push them over the edge there. Because otherwise, if you want to get to that 50%, it is going to take, again, 6 overkill hits. That's not that insane like it sounds, because again, 6 out of 8 would be really hard to get under normal circumstances. But keep in mind, you guys will have other things like craft essences, so you can throw on something like Traces of Christmas on him to make this a little bit easier, to be able to stretch this a little bit further. And then certainly there's other little tricks you guys can use, like pre-carding if you really need to, or just trying to like min-max your refund on, like, say, wave 1, where the enemies are at their lowest. So that's definitely something you guys can do. And again, you might be able to pull off something like a 50% CE with double Scotty, and then maybe something like Fragment of 2004 in the right set of circumstances. But it may just depend on you having the right setup in order to be able to do that, the right situation, the right enemy type, you name it. Okay, but keep in mind too, this isn't assuming anything extra like a mystic code, like a craft essence to help out, or again extra NP levels or anything like that for easier chances at getting overkill hits, right? Again, NP levels don't naturally add to this in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to make it more likely for you to actually land overkill. Now, when it comes to triple Scotty, though, this is where things get a lot better for him. So triple Scotty right there with just 2 overkill hits, which is typically going to be really easy to do. This means that obviously you killed the unit, right? In order to get 1 overkill hit on the enemy, you would just need, again, basically a kill shot. It would have to actually kill with the NP. But again, getting to 2 overkill hits shouldn't be that hard. It should be relatively doable for a lot of people. Just keep in mind that the way overkill hits tend to work, and I'll show that to you guys here, right here looking at this, is the number of hits, kind of the amount of percentage that you need in terms of the damage in order to get the overkill, scales up over time. So basically, the way to think about this is, in order to get 1 overkill hit, you would definitely need to kill, right? But in order to get to the second one, you need to at least get less than 26 damage here, or less than 26% damage back from that number. So essentially, you need to kill with at least 74% of the damage of the NP. That's really not that hard to do, right? That's really something that I think in most cases will work out. And then certainly as we're talking about this, you start thinking about some of the early waves, that'll be a no-brainer. You'll easily get enough. It would be the later waves, or maybe an odd set node where you don't have the perfect 3-3x type of structure, where this will come into concern. But that's where, again, I'm going to say, hey, look, if you actually start thinking about this, 1, the overall deck here will help bail you out in that regard. And 2, if you do have to card after an NP, remember, he does have the tricolor buff here, as well as the crit damage, to help that out and help facilitate that. So that's why, again, like a lot of people, I think, were looking at him as if he only had 20% quick up and thinking that he wasn't going to be that good. But as you start looking at the overkill here, you realize it's actually 40% right there just based off of that. And he still has the 30% attack steroid to help him in that regard. So really, really not that bad. I do think you guys would be able to use him with, say, like a double Scotty and an Oberon, but the refund might be a little wonky at times if you're trying to make that work. Now, again, I think a lot of people are going to sit here and they're going to say, okay, Cad, but I don't need him. So, you know, sell me on him. Why should I get him? And so right now I'm going to actually pull up the NP damage list here by Rat. And again, we're going to go take a look here basically at his numbers, just to kind of show you my perception of him and where he stands. Again, this spreadsheet does make some assumptions with regards to damage, so don't worry too much about it. It's not the end all be all. You guys don't need to treat it like it's gospel or anything like that, but it is good for at least relative comparisons and understanding a little bit how certain units work. So on screen right now, you guys can see the NP damage list here, and you guys can see basically a lot of your SSR archers here have some kind of special effect, some kind of niche that they're able to exploit for more damage. But if you actually look at Takasugi here, Takasugi is the highest amongst all non-buster archers in that regard. Now, certainly you have someone like Sei that does have, again, her 3 different niches that can come into play and allow her to exploit that for other damage. But maybe she doesn't necessarily get that. Maybe she doesn't get as much. And you look at that where if her niches don't come into play, and we're just talking raw damage here, Sei is markedly lower than him. So the one feather in Takasugi's cap is that he doesn't have to rely on a niche to do good damage. His damage is just solid to begin with. And I think the way that I've seen a lot of people comparing him is to units like Gil, is to units like Ishtar right now. Whereas the reality here, guys, that you should probably be comparing him more to someone like, say, Jarcher here, who again is going to be a little bit lower, or say right down here. Now, I think one of the also valid comparisons, though, that a lot of people are talking about is going to be someone like Atalanta, someone like Ilya, where maybe you have higher NP levels of them because they're a 4-star, or at least in Atalanta's case, because they're permanent. Again, that's going to be one of the knocks against Takasugi, is he is a limited unit. So I think a lot of people are going to kind of say, hey, look, I don't need to roll him. I don't want to roll him. You know, again, he's not going to have the chance to spook me. So that's going to be an issue if I want him. But I think a lot of people are going to punt and just say, hey, I have good archers. Don't feel bad, though, if you're doing that. Again, you guys don't need to justify not rolling on a unit. You only need to justify rolling on a unit. You only need to say, like, hey, you know, do I really like this unit? If so, roll. If you don't like the unit, don't roll, right? So that's one thing to take away from this. But the other thing is that, again, as we start to look at the rest of the archers in comparison, I think he is at least going to have that solid kit to kind of keep him relatively adaptable for all situations. And if you're a more newer player and you don't have access to some of these other OP archers here, I think it makes a lot of sense to roll someone like Takasugi. But I think the big issue is going to be, as always with Quick, do you have the supports in order to be able to actually allow him to pop off? That is going to be one of the concerns that I think a lot of people will have, is do they have triple Scotty? Do they have double Scotty? Can they pull that sort of thing off? And if you don't, that definitely makes this consideration harder here. But again, I don't think Takasugi's a bad unit. In fact, I think he's actually relatively good for what he is, coming in at that 50% refund number on Quick, because it's not something that Say is necessarily going to do. And so you'd have to start looking down towards, again, units like Atalanta or Ilya to try and be hitting those numbers on refund. So at least in terms of damage, I think he's solid. And in terms of kit, I think he's really adaptable and very usable. The problem is just going to be, do you need him and do you want him? So let me know what you guys think of Takasugi. Let me know if you're going to be skipping him or if you're going to be rolling him, and why. And I'll make sure to read your comments. I will see you guys for the next video. Have a good one.